My name is Paul Douglas. I am a bewildered meteorologist. I'm a businessman. I'm on my 5th company. I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm a Republican. I'm an evangelical Christian, a born-again Christian. My son is in the Navy. He flies helicopters, graduated from the Naval Academy, so we are a military family. And I acknowledge that data and facts still matter, and that the climate is changing, and that we are most likely the ones driving those changes today. All of which together makes me the rough equivalent of an albino unicorn. It's painful. It was the weather, the increasingly freakish weather. The weather historically has been a grandiose symphony, God's symphony, natural ebb and flow of the atmosphere. But by the late 90s, it resembled a second-grade orchestra, a very talent-free orchestra with violins screeching and horns playing out of tune and cymbal crashes coming in when they shouldn't be coming in. Something was off. The rhythm of the weather was off. That was the tip-off, and I wasn't the only one that noticed that. Something had changed. And so that's what got me looking at the science, at the peer-reviewed science, and it dawned on me that climate theory had already become a meteorological reality. We were seeing the symptoms of a rapidly changing climate in the weather. And all I was doing was trying to connect the dots, asking why. I'm not a climate scientist, but I'm seeing the signature of a rapidly changing climate showing up on the weather maps. Weather systems are moving slower. The weather tends to get stuck more than it did 30, 40 years ago. And when the weather stalls, bad things happen. You wind up with record historic droughts, heat waves, biblical floods. Again, this is not a weather model. This is just observation. You look at sea level. Sea level is up 8, 10 inches. In New York City, it's closer to 17 inches. Starting with a higher sea level made Sandy's impact much worse. It flooded an estimated 80,000 additional homes than if the water had been where it was back in the 1700s. So, you know, it's one thing we don't have to worry about here in Minnesota, but so many Americans live on or near the ocean, and that ocean is rising. That's not a climate model. That's sticking a gauge in the water and seeing the water creep up. People say, what's 2 or 3 degrees? Minnesota has warmed up about 3 degrees since the 1830s. And I say, hey, when's the last time you were 2 or 3 degrees warmer? How did you feel? Chances are there were symptoms. You had a rash, sniffles, fever, blisters, whatever, coughing, sneezing. There were visible, tangible symptoms. And that's what we're seeing now in the weather system. Weather and climate are flip sides of the same coin. You change the climate, it's going to impact the weather. It's not a theory, it's happening. So people will be seeing evidence, signs of a changing climate in their everyday lives with greater frequency. Not every day, but a longer growing season, new things growing in their yards, more bizarre storms, stuff that they can't remember as kids or even their parents could remember, these kinds of storms. We are juicing the atmosphere, and we're cooking up things we haven't seen before. We're going to have some holy cow moments. First of all, it's good to be skeptical. Everybody should be skeptical. In a day and age of hackers and scammers and think tanks and special interests, we should all be skeptical. You know who's skeptical is? Scientists. Science is organized skepticism. And to get, now the number is 99.9% of published climate science, 99% of published climate scientists all agree that the climate is changing and we're most likely the ones with our feet on the accelerator driving those changes. But you're right. I mean, the climate has always responded to forcings, volcanic eruptions, changes in the Earth's orbit around the sun, changes in the amount of solar energy reaching the Earth. So it's not a mystery. And one of the big drivers has been CO2 in the atmosphere, greenhouse gases. There was a time, a long time ago, when it was even warmer. But we had planetary volcanic eruptions going off, contributing CO2 into the atmosphere on a massive scale. You know, we've gone from about an average of 280 parts per million to about 400 parts per million in what is a blink of an eye. And that's what has the climate scientists worried. I mean, we are the volcano. We are the ones driving these changes now that might have happened naturally over the course of many centuries. We're condensing that into 30, 50, 100 years. We are conducting an experiment on the atmosphere, hoping everything turns out okay, and it may. But we should probably have an insurance policy just in case. But we've been poking at the climate system with a long, sharp, carbon-tipped stick and then acting surprised when the weather bites back. And it is biting back with greater frequency and greater ferocity. And that isn't just my observations. That's insurance companies, reinsurance companies, the military sees climate change as a force multiplier, which can impact water shortages, the ability to grow food, mass migrations, civil disorder. There are strands of evidence, but it really requires keeping an open mind. And when I talk to people of all faiths, I say, look, you may not believe me, you may not believe the climate experts, you may not believe the scientists. Do yourself a favor. Believe your own eyes. Every day, 80 million tons of clear, colorless, odorless CO2 is being emitted into the atmosphere as we drive, as we commute, utilities, keeping the lights on. And there's been no price to pay for that. Those costs, those externalities aren't factored into the free market. The market's not free. What we've done, we've privatized profits and socialized the costs. Those costs now are being borne by everybody, and they're being borne by future generations. Once you put a price on a pollutant, the markets react and come up with alternatives. We did this with acid rain. The scientists said, we've got a problem. Here's what we have to do. Okay. We did this with the ozone hole, chlorofluorocarbons, man-made chemicals from refrigerants drifting into the stratosphere, eating away at the natural ozone layer, protecting the Earth from UV radiation. We solved that problem, and the ozone hole is not as big as it was in the 1970s. We came together collectively as a planet and said, all right, we're going to rule out these chemicals. The problem today is that some of the richest companies that have ever existed, their stock price, their existence depends on being able to harvest the trillions of dollars of carbon still in the ground. When in doubt, follow the money. I think the most important thing you can do is reach out to your friends, to your family, to your colleagues, to your network, and just talk about the issue. You know, a lot of people seem to think that we're criticizing their lifestyle. You're telling me I can't drive my 16-ton SUV, Paul? I have to feel guilty about that? No, I'm not telling you that. I'm just saying the next time you buy a vehicle, maybe consider something a little more fuel efficient, because you'll save money. I have not met anybody yet in my life who does not want to save money where possible. And I think once you convince people, and it takes some time, there is a way to do it, that going green actually puts more green back in your wallet, back in your purse. And it's good for the environment. It's good for your kids and your grandkids and future generations. You're doing the right thing. You know, you can get an energy audit for your house. Again, save energy, save money. You can drive a more fuel-efficient vehicle. You can buy carbon credits when you fly. I tell people, I think the most important thing we can do is make sure that the people who represent us, locally, at a state level, at a federal level, still have a respect for science. And don't kowtow to big fading industries that are trying to put a different narrative out there. We have an obligation as people of faith, as Christians, as Catholics, to not only respect today's unborn, but to protect tomorrow's unborn, next year's unborn, the next generation of unborn, not just in this country, but worldwide. God gave us a gift, a holy, divine, perfect gift. This planet is a gift. If you believe in God, you believe in Christ, you believe that what we have here is unique. And it's deserving of our care, our attention. We have an obligation. My father escaped communist East Germany, and he said, Americans like to talk about their rights. They don't talk as much about their responsibilities. Christ gave us the words and the mandate, the mission, to take care of our neighbors, to love our neighbors as ourselves, and to take care of the poorest among us. This is the civil rights issue of the 21st century, because those who have the least are the first to be impacted. And it's not a 30 years from now thing. It's happening today. The frequency of flooding close to sea level is spiking upward. It is affecting the poorest among us in the United States, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan. So those with the least will be first to be impacted. The 1%, they can build higher walls, they can move, they can do whatever has to be done. They will have the ability, the means to adapt to whatever nature throws at us. The poorest among us don't have that flexibility to move, to build higher walls. We do have an obligation, not only to worship God with our words, but to worship God with our deeds. And I think Pope Francis did the right thing by calling attention to this. Yes, it is an environmental challenge, it's an economic challenge, it's an energy challenge, but it's also, it's a morality challenge. It goes to the heart of ethics and responsibility, and what role do we have as Christians, as Catholics, to take care of our brothers and sisters. I was made in God's self-image, so were you. And I believe that He gave us big, beautiful brains, the ability to think logically, to reason, and to have the good sense not to foul our nest. And that's what Pope Francis called attention to.